Content warning. Film Fiends discusses movies that often feature extreme and or offensive subject matter. You have been warned.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Film Fiends, the podcast where we talk about all things related to horror film. My name's Alex.
And this is Bryant.
Thank you for joining us for episode 5. Today, we're going to be discussing body horror, one of the various subgenres often thought to be started by David Cronenberg and partly kept alive by his son, Brandon Cronenberg.
Ooh, yeah, one of my favorites as well. There's always a lot of very interesting projects in this one.
Yep.
Kind of stuff that just kind of goes definitely beyond the norm with a lot of, especially with the visuals of what they're able to show. A lot of very unhinged stuff sometimes, which, you know, is a lot of the appeal.
Absolutely. Very appealing, very fun in a way. I think body horror is one of those interesting subgenres that does tend to push the envelope a lot and tends to be paired with certain other genres that lead to it being kind of mind-bending or strange or kind of weird fiction-y. It's going to be a blast to talk about.
Oh, true. Especially because just beyond, you know, the kind of surface appeal of that, I also feel that it definitely gets to a lot of deeper issues. If you've listened to our past episodes, you kind of know I definitely kind of tend towards a lot of the more fantastical interpretations of real issues. And I think that body horror definitely hits a lot of my kind of favorite things about storytelling in that sense.
It certainly harkens back to something I know we've mentioned here before regarding horror being catharsis for the viewer. There's a lot of interesting things that body horror can do to allow the viewer to come to terms or grips with health issues. You can kind of, as we'll talk about later in the film Antiviral, get a little bit of a sense of what a chronic illness might be like in this really fantastical and kind of horrific rendition of it. In a way that may be a little bit more, what's the way to put it? Not necessarily easily consumed, but it might hit you a little bit deeper than if you were to like just watch a medical film about cancer, for example.
Oh yeah, totally. And I know when we were kind of putting this together, there was a point where I was like, oh yeah, but this genre is always so personal to me. And then it was like every single other person is like, yeah, and me too. And then you're like, oh yeah, because it's so universal. We all, you know,
we all got a body.
It sounds so dumb to say, but we all have a body.
We all got
and
a body,
everybody at least catches a cold, if not something more. So we all have some sort of idea of kind of what it feels like when your body stops working on you, because it feels like you'll never get better again sometimes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's something that can really, really strike people in a very personal way.
Absolutely. And it's, I think, even more prescient in the face of, obviously, the coronavirus pandemic, which, fingers crossed, looks like we might be sort of clearing the other side of. But there's a national anxiety that's still palpable. And going back and watching these films, you can see that anxiety has always lurked underneath the surface. It comes out in these kind of body horror focused films and films that have to deal with sickness and even some things kind of like zombie films in some ways. But the anxiety is there, and it's just that we were unfortunate enough to live through the historic event of it actually happening.
True. Watching both of these movies, there were just theme upon theme where I was like, oh my God, that's so last year, this year, right now.
Especially like, Antiviral, not to interrupt, especially Antiviral is weirdly predictive.
There's so much imagery of checking your temperature. Oh my God, when he did the nasal swab, I was like,
I literally was like, wait,
I know what
second.
That feels like.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Seriously. And if I had watched that before a year ago, I would have just been like, oh, gross. That was a really long swab. What the hell? But knowing what I know now, and of course, having got them as myself, it's kind of a different viewing.
True. And I think apart from just the personal body stuff, both of these movies touch on societal issues that I think just get more and more relevant as we go. And one of the big symmetries between the two was a lot of how you interact with society, whether it be media or celebrity, and then the way that kind of feeds back to you. Was kind of a lot of the rhyming that I saw kind of between those two generations. So, and Yeah. Anyway, let's actually kind of get into the meat of it before we kind of spoil too much.
Right, exactly. Don't want to get
let's-
into the main topic without actually getting into it. I will say really quick, of course, you will be reading the episode title, but just to be clear, the two movies we are talking about today are Videodrome by David Cronenberg and then Antiviral by Brandon Cronenberg. And we'll be touching on a lot of other works throughout, I'm sure, but those are the two that we kind of watched and brought to the table for today.
Absolutely. Videodrome is one of my favorites. I believe I mentioned that several times already on this podcast. Right now, I am wearing my Videodrome shirt. It's the giant skull from far away that when you look closer kind of has a collage of all the kind of different movie stuff in it.
Long live the new flesh.
Exactly. Plus the slogan on it. And people always ask me what it means. And I actually have no idea what to tell them. Like, I've seen that movie like 5 times, and I still can't really explain what the catchphrase means. I always just say it's a reference. It's a movie reference.
I love that. All right, folks. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into our first recurring segment, Horror News, where we're going to talk about all of the new and upcoming fun things to keep an eye out for in the horror genre. Going to pass it over to Bryant here to get us started.
Yeah. Going through it real quick, one of the things I was excited to hear about is James Wan has another original franchise coming out. It's going to be called Malignant. Just kind of hearing the first kind of just rumorings that it exists and it's kind of finished and going to be coming out September 10th. We don't know too much about it, but if I were to have to guess about a movie called Malignant, I would think it would be, I think it's going to be kind of a ghost story.
I don't know, man. Malignant tumor. We getting body horror from Juan, maybe.
Possibly. It just kind of seems to fit with his whole Insidious.
He likes ghosts.
Yes.
Conjuring, Insidious. Yeah.
So love it. I am definitely a big James Wan fan.
Same.
I'm always kind of happy, so I'll be checking that out. He seems to be the absolute franchise king. And before that, kind of a movie that's been getting a lot of hype. One called The Night House. I think it's scheduled to be released kind of more near the end of August. But what I've been hearing, I think it played at Sundance and has been getting really good buzz. And those kind of tend to be a lot of my favorite movies when things kind of come out of the festival circuit with a lot of good word of mouth coming.
It is hard to go wrong on things like that. I want to say Shape of Water had the similar kind of thing going for it,
Yep.
and then it did end up releasing, and it was just incredible. Did Midsommar do that as well? Anyway, either way.
I would imagine so. A lot of those kind of mid-level or not main studio, definitely you have to do the festival route where you just kind of get played. They're produced by somebody that can finance the movie, and then you play it at a festival and you try to sell it to somebody that can distribute it.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that one's by David Bruckner, the guy that did The Ritual. If you ever saw that kind of Lost in the Woods monster movie, that was kind of cool. I'd look for that one on Netflix if you're down for kind of a really original, but just still kind of satisfying monster Lost in the Woods kind of thing. But that's definitely one that I am going to be looking out for. I'm going to pass it over to you, Alex.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got one as well, which I just thought was kind of funny, wanted to bring up. It looks like Rob Zombie has gotten tapped to direct the reboot of The Munsters, which I'm not super familiar with, but I guess it's kind of like a Frankenstein Addams Family kind of thing.
It's kind of a bizarre choice. I don't know if he's going to go super... Yeah, it doesn't sound like a Rob Zombie movie. I know that they just did the Addams Family again recently. Addams Family seems like this evergreen franchise. So I would guess, my guess is that they just want to kind of copy that. But I don't know why you would get Rob Zombie to do that.
In the grimdark future, there is only monsters.
Yeah, or something. I don't know. Get Tim Burton. He seems more than willing to do like Dark Shadows or any old TV show that has some sort of like horror theme to it.
Oh, that would be a great choice, I feel like. Yeah, it's an enigma. Unsure why Zombie would be the choice there, given that he's so aggressive and abrasive and kind of in your face. And I'm not sure how he's going to deal with a campy property like that, but we will see. It'll be a fun thing to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. I always tell myself I'm not going to say that, but yeah.
Absolutely, folks. Oh man. Hey, this is our first podcast, everyone. So we're listening to ourselves more than we probably ever have in our lives, and picking out these these phrases and words that we tend to repeat. So we may chuckle to ourselves from time to time, just based on those recurring, I think I say 100% a lot,
we gotta let you in on the inside joke, or else it's just going to be two babbling maniacs. Just not.
Yep, and unfortunately, I don't think one precludes the other, so it's going to be babbling maniacs either way. But with that said, I think that'll wrap up our horror news for this episode. Stay tuned for all of that. And if you guys ever have any... Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Just real quick. The other thing that happened is movies actually came out.
Yes,
finally.
Right.
So I think we're going to get to that on what we last watched, but just to rattle off: Quiet Place 2, Army of the Dead, Conjuring 3, and Saw 9, because I refuse to say alternate titles.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Excuse me. The official title for that movie is Spiral: From the Book of Saw.
It's the 9th Saw movie. Anyway, we're going to cover those when we get to what we last watched. Sorry, I'm just being a troll right now.
Yeah, no, we will.
Spiral from the Book of Saw.
Oh, my Lord.
Exactly. And The Conjuring, the devil made me do it.
Yes, absolutely. The devil made me do it. Yeah, it's not F9. It's Fast and the Furious, the 9th. We are all family.
Yes. Two family, two forever.
All boy. All right.
Here we go. All right. So on to the main thing.
Yep, absolutely. And just real quick as well, if any of you listeners out there, if you ever have any horror news that you would like us to highlight on the podcast, please feel free to give us a comment on our Facebook at Real Film Fiends, Instagram at Real Film Fiends. We're also on Twitter, same thing, at Real Film Fiends. We do check those things. If you guys ever have anything that, from topics you think you'd like us to cover, to, like I said, if you hear about a movie coming out that you want us to be aware of, you want us to get out there, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely, especially if you just have like a movie you want us to, something new that we both haven't seen that maybe just slipped by our radar. I think the stuff like that would make a great episode. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and get into our main topic regarding body horror and how it is treated in the works of the Cronenbergs, specifically Videodrome and Antiviral. So the term body horror, Bryant, that's a little bit of a, I don't necessarily want to say loaded term, but it's one of those strange genres that tries to defy definition. So did you want to kind of get us started on what you think of as body horror?
Sure. Like you said, it's kind of nebulous, because when you kind of look at a lot of the works that can be defined as it, they kind of each have their own interpretation of it. For me, what it is that it's about stories about when your body is out of your control or fails or stops working, whether that be disease or an injury. And it's usually those, because it suggests death, but it's usually not directly about it. But of course, all those things kind of suggest, the ultimate body failing.
Absolutely.
So it's projects that kind of get into the heart of that. And that's such a broad thing that it can take on so many different permutations. Like when we just get into these movies and we describe them, they're going to have so many other themes layered on top of that. Where it's usually kind of almost a style choice in how you kind of portray other themes.
I would say that body horror definitely has visual touchstones and an aesthetic that is related to it that is very specific.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think you had a little more of a concrete definition.
Yeah, I didn't do a ton of notes for this episode, but the one thing that I did was try and write out a little bit about body horror. I did some research just about what the common definition is online, some works that are generally considered to be body horror. And then from that, I combined that with my own kind of thoughts and feelings about it and came up with some thoughts on it. So body horror, like we've talked about, is a strange thing to define. The basic term, of course, like we mentioned, makes it just sound like, something horrific is happening to your body, but there is definitely more depth to the term than that. Body horror, in my opinion, is primarily concerned with changes happening to the body in like strange or unnatural ways. and it's almost always closely tied to pain, violence, mutilation, but doesn't have to be. Whereas a slasher film might have people getting stabbed or cut into tiny pieces, body horror is more concerned with transformative effects on the body, often through disease, parasitism, sometimes the supernatural, or some other strange, unknowable force. There's an obvious overlap with Lovecraftian horror and some torture and gore-focused horror, but the term body horror does tend to refer to a distinct set of principles. Like Tetsuo blobbing out in Akira, Max's hand transforming in Videodrome, the gradual reanimation of the corpse in Hellraiser. They have a very distinct, visceral feeling that is unique to the genre.
Yeah, I usually don't think of that Hellraiser reanimation sequence. That's a wonderful effects sequence.
Absolutely.
I love that one. But I think what they're getting at is that it's that just the little bits of the body. It's just those individual components. When you can suggest that you're like an amalgamation of these parts, it almost has that suggestion of you being a machine. Which I think also rhymes with when Max's hand turns into a gun. He has kind of those cables coming out, or even Tetsuo before he blobs out has his robotic
his metal arm that it comes through. Yeah,
and it comes out of his robotic arm. And speaking of Tetsuo, I'm just going to throw out Tetsuo the Iron Man real quick. It's kind of I know it's a little more of an obscure movie, but I'm going to put it as one of my kind of foundational body horror pieces.
Oh, it absolutely is. I bring that up here in a moment as well.
Not to spoil it then. I'll just kick it back to you. Let's get
totally
to
fine. I don't mean to just monologue here.
Yeah.
I did happen to be able to cobble together some thoughts about this. So all of that kind of led me to try to make a one sentence definition for the body horror genre. What I ended up with is body horror is concerned with transformation or mutilation of the body by unnatural or unknowable forces, causing the audience both physical and psychological distress. What I mean by that last part is, if you're watching, again, a slasher, for example, and you see somebody get stabbed 30 times, you might be in some physical and maybe a small amount of psychological distress, but your brain's primarily going, oh man, that sucks, that person got stabbed, and then you kind of move on to the next scene. If you're in a tense psychological thriller where somebody's getting stalked or you're hiding in a closet, you're getting a lot of the psychological distress, but not a lot of the physical distress. And there's a specific intersection where I think body horror lives. This is sometimes called squick online, where it's just a certain emotion that you feel that's kind of hard to describe, where you're just, your skin is crawling and you're kind of squirming in your seat. And I think body horror tends to evoke that emotion in particular.
At least the lingering stuff too. I think that's why it's kind of has such an impact on people. Just kind of a quick detour. I used to work in a video / comic store. And honestly, there was a couple subgenres that were always really, really hard to find for people, namely body horror, Lovecraftian, and steampunk, which I can see, why they're kind of codified as a genre, but it's kind of hard to make like a shelf out of them.
Especially, and I'm going to segue a little bit here, but I'm going to knock steampunk by saying in order to be a genre, you have to have a seminal work.
Oof. Oof. Yeah, no, I mean, with steampunk, I would just recommend Girl Genius over and over again. And basically for body horror, just Cronenberg over and over again.
Yep.
And then for Lovecraft, hopefully I actually had a Lovecraft paperback on the shelf. Or, you're just recommending From Beyond and Reanimator kind of over and over again.
And kind of going into that as well, like it's like Bryant said, it's hard to make a shelf out of on the at the video store. And that's because body horror is also somewhat characterized by the other genres that it frequently touches. Sci-fi and body horror share an intimate relationship with things like Videodrome, Possessor, and Tetsuo the Iron Man, all having surreal technological elements that blend with the body horror. Aliens are a common companion as well, with films like Annihilation and the Alien franchise.
Annihilation does actually, yes.
Right?
People get their DNA recombined and they change.
When you see the person made of flowers or
good
person
one.
Made of crystals, and it's a like an interestingly, I feel like, more beautiful kind of representation of what body horror is. But it's still definitely very strange and horrific, but they just have a really cool aesthetic with it.
But it's going to get put on the sci-fi shelf at the video store.
Yep. It's definitely not getting put on the body horror shelf, even though it has those elements. Japanese anime and manga also have adapted quite a lot of body horror into their darker works. Obviously, Akira, the seminal example, as well as Parasite, Made in Abyss, and a lot of Junji Ito's work. Surrealism, dream states, and psychedelic elements also common in body horror, with examples like Suspiria, Antiviral, and Jacob's Ladder, all having a little bit of those elements kind of tucked in them. And this all leads me to believe that body horror is one of those strange genres that's so pure, it threatens to be overtaken by all the other genres that adopt it. However, when it's steeped in the film of another genre, body horror has a specific power to be unquestionably recognized by the viewer whenever it's on display. It is at once elusive and commanding, a platonic concept of horror that harkens back to the primal fears of bodily harm and the terrifying unknown.
Yeah, you gave me like 3 separate trains of thought during that whole thing. First of all, that Suspiria has that exact same kind of bewildering sense that actually both of these movies have, where you're kind of scrambling to kind of keep up with what's going on, and just kind of like losing your grip on reality kind of a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just kind of the other thing I wanted to finish up was you mentioned it being such a pure genre. Yeah, that it does often get swallowed up. It's usually another movie with a body horror element.
Yep.
So that's kind of often why I kind of get so confused of it as like this prime genre, because it's so hard to find those pure, that is just body horror.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it feels like it's one of those things where it's almost kind of like came out of the internet, where people are like, well, I like things with kind of this element. Okay, well, we're going to call it body horror, and now we're going to ask for more body horror work. And I think you are seeing more things that have body horror elements, but it's really elusive to find something that's wholly body horror.
I completely agree. It just ends up being one of those things that's kind of a contradiction. If you were to tell me you wanted a body horror movie with no sci-fi elements, for example, that would be kind of hard to pin down. I'm sure we could find something. For example, Suspiria doesn't have sci-fi elements, but would you call it a pure body horror film? No. So it was super interesting to think about, super interesting to talk about and bring to the table today because, I landed on the term platonic concept of horror. And I feel like that for me just made a lot of sense because it is very pure and it is, I think, kind of able to be defined, but it's really difficult to bring into the real world.
I know. Yeah, even when I just Googled Videodrome, it's like it lists sci-fi first, I think. And I was like, what?
Hold on now.
And you're like, oh yeah, no, there's totally sci-fi elements.
It is, because it is kind of a sci-fi film. If you were to not read it for the body horror, you might just think that it's like a cautionary tale about how far technology can like rot and degrade us and society.
It's just also kind of funny seeing something where like VHS tapes are like this cutting edge, where they're like all of these like cutting edge hackers and stuff using 40-year-old technology.
There's one really funny scene where Max is meeting with I cannot remember what the girl's name, but the Oblivion's daughter, and he's asking for a certain tape, and she goes, "Oh yeah, what format do you want that in?" And he just goes, "Videodrome," and she goes, "Oh, is that a Japanese file format?" It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny.
But yeah, no, I always wonder, I worry about how those are going to age. Like, does Videodrome still play today if you're like doing all of this like, high-tech sci-fi stuff and it's like, VHS tapes? Like, I don't worry so much with like The Ring because it like, ghosts haunt old things. Like, you show somebody it and it's just creepier, actually, I think, than when it was, because it's like this old kind of ancient thing and it's almost like hard to find something to play it on. But when it's presented as the cutting edge, I do get a little worried that it's going to age poorly.
That's actually a very good point. I never even considered the fact that The Ring could age poorly. And I think that's the reason you brought up is why. Because, I mean, it's just natural to the film. It just makes sense. And I think I also have kind of a, not the best perspective on this, because while I am younger than Bryant, I did grow up with a VHS VCR and VHSs. So it's not as like weird for me to watch something like Videodrome because I have interacted with this technology. I
was definitely a VHS generation.
Yeah,
I was
totally.
like buying like the packs of blank VHS generation to like record movies off HBO.
Oh, heck yeah, that's right. Come get him, guys. He just incriminated himself. I didn't purchase a lot of VHSs myself, but I definitely grew up with them. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I love to this day, I watched on VHS first. But yeah, it is interesting. As I watched it, it definitely felt dated. And I'm curious if you were to show it to, say, like a 15-year-old, like what would they get out of it?
I would hope that they could like kind of jump the technology forward in their mind, because I think there's a lot of themes that are actually more relevant to social media than to TV.
Definitely.
There was so many things where I was like, dude, you're not talking about TV. Like, you're talking about something that's going to be invented in 30 years. Like,
and I think, I mean, Cronenberg, that's part of his genius, is I feel like he was able to see these technologies, and he was able to
human trend before the technology trend.
That's a great way to put it.
Like,
absolutely, he could extrapolate what was going to happen with these technologies. It just didn't happen on a television screen.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of crazy. So I would hope that they could see that. Again, like, it is kind of goofy and it's weird and there's some out there stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just meme fodder at this point, but
I'm not going to go quite.
Creeps me out. It creeps me out. So I would like to think that it still has some sort of potency.
Absolutely. I won't go quite as far as to call it meme fodder. I did just watch Videodrome for the first time a couple of nights ago, and I definitely enjoyed it. It was a little dated for me. And there was a couple of elements that didn't quite land, but this is actually a great segue into, I think we're going to now kind of talk about Videodrome, how it handles the body horror and just some thoughts about it in general. So Bryant, I know Videodrome is, like you've mentioned, you've watched it 4 or 5 times and it still kind of gets under your skin every time. Do you want to unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first let's actually just do a quick plot synopsis.
Spoiler alert, in case you haven't seen Videodrome, take pause and go watch Videodrome and then come back.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that's very hard to talk about without spoiling the whole thing. Kind of one thing leads into the next. Anyway, it's about a producer at kind of a low budget TV station. I think it's channel 85.
83?
83?
I don't know.
Anyway, his name's Max. He's played by James Woods, and he wants kind of scummy content.
He's already showing softcore porn and, intense, horror stuff on his station, but it's not enough.
Exactly. So the guy that works for him, his hacker guy, who kind of just finds these signals that are getting broadcast about. They find this pirate signal that's just playing snuff movies. Max thinks it's fake. Max thinks it's a show that just has no plot and is just the good stuff. That is, just all torture all the time. And he thinks it's the most brilliant thing ever. And he wants to play it.
That's the second slogan of Videodrome. Sure. The first is long live the new flesh. The second is all torture all the time.
Yes. So the rest of the movie follows Max trying to track down this Videodrome channel or program and finding an increasingly kind of complex conspiracy unfolding in front of him, where there's a signal underneath the actual broadcast that is getting into your mind. I think it mentions transforming your pineal gland a little bit, or at least that was kind of the impression I got.
I think that specifically it says it causes a brain tumor.
Creates a brain tumor.
But then the weird conspiracy theorist guy who you only ever interact with through the videotapes that he's recorded of himself, he has this conjecture in one of the weird hallucination, maybe not sort of scenes, that it's not actually a brain tumor, it's a new organ being formed in the brain kind of thing.
Gotcha. So yeah, the conspiracy level of it wants to use it to kind of cleanse humanity. They're going to hide it under the scummiest thing possible so that anybody that wants to tune in to watch Videodrome is going to develop this brain tumor. And then on the flip side is the renegade, the Professor Oblivion, who may be the most kind of comical thing, yet prescient part of it, which you mentioned. Yeah, does it play with people today? And I think that the Professor Oblivion's gonna probably be what that hinges on.
He has the line in there that he says, in the future, everybody's going to speak through TVs and we're all going to use different names. And that's why he calls himself Oblivion. He later does clarify, obviously, that's not his real name. And he kind of gives the main character's real name. But that was a very oddly predictive moment where it's like, yeah, we all have social media and we all have handles and we are all literally interacting through a screen in our pockets. And I was kind of just like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, there's the digital world of social media that kind of people may put more of themselves into than, the quote unquote real world. So while it's kind of goofy to think that you would have like a TV personality, you just click that forward one or two kind of generations of technology and you're like, oh, wow, that was oddly prescient and predictive.
Yep.
So anyway, this Professor Oblivion believes that it's actually kind of it's going to make people into kind of the next evolutionary step, kind of make us better and kind of transform us out of this kind of horrid world that's spiraling downhill. And kind of part of the window dressing of the whole thing is kind of how bleak and depressing our society has become.
Absolutely. There's certain scenes, actually, Bryant and I had just discussed this before the podcast. They do a very good job of painting a really unpleasant society. And I think part of the subtext is that it's these reliance on technologies that may be causing the breakdown in societal relations. There's not a huge through line to that in the actual movie, but I would not be remiss, I think, to read it that way.
Several just minor characters, like not even like characters, just like people you pass in the street that are just having a horrid time, just shouting at each other and screaming profanity.
Like there's actual lines of dialogue given just to extras as we're moving through the scene that kind of just paint the world as this awful place to be living in, as this guy's going in looking for snuff to put on TV.
Exactly. And he does get confronted on the talk show, or I think the host mentions that do you feel responsible for the societal degradation?
Well, and his response is something we've literally said on this channel on this podcast in defense of horror. He literally says something to the effect of, well, I'm kind of giving these people the opportunity to, enjoy this stuff and act out their fantasies in a non-harmful way. Said another way, something that I literally said earlier this episode is that horror is a way to give catharsis to people. And so it's something we've mentioned at least to each other before, but I think probably on here as well, in that Videodrome, we did mention it because it was the meta kind of-ness of New Nightmare that brought it up, was that Videodrome tends to be scary to the horror viewer because it asks you to examine those ideas about why do you want to watch all this terrible stuff. And then the big defense that we tend to use comes out of the mouth of this absolute scumbag main character. And then you're forced to ask like, oh man, am I Max?
Yeah, and it's the way that Max's mind is transformed by what he watches. It's always the kind of the classic back and forth of, well, artists are reflecting society. However, if, media also affects you in certain ways, so are you programming yourself when you're watching certain medias?
Oh man, it's such a good way to put it too. Programming yourself. Oh man.
Which, you are watching Videodrome along with Max, so it's always exactly the uncomfortable is the exact same thing happening to me. Am I going to get, weird violent hallucinations?
Absolutely.
Now that I have this violent imagery in my mind, are those thoughts that I would have if I had not seen this movie? So have I been programmed by Videodrome,
Absolutely.
in a poetic sense? Like
of course. Well, and there is, it's actually something, a literary technique, I guess I would call it, that's often used in creepypasta online as well. If you're not familiar, creepypasta is a very specific type of written internet horror media that's like kind of like short stories, but they tend to be in a first-person perspective, and they tend to revolve around the internet or technological concepts. Basically, they're short stories that are written, and you're supposed to read them as if they were true, and it's supposed to be, scary things that are happening. There's a couple of very popular, very common creepypastas, probably the biggest of which being called Smile Dog, that revolves around media that like you're not supposed to see, or pictures that if you do see it, it's going to corrupt your computer or you'll die within however many days. Similar to The Ring as well.
I was just about to bring that up. because you are also watching the Ring video.
Yep.
So yeah, I can get you. It's
So there's
the tale of like, and then whoever reads this tale is the next one doomed. So you now have to pass it on. Kind of.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Yeah. And even chain letters like those old ones you used to get, kind of same idea.
Yeah.
But there was, I mean, I did have that same moment in Videodrome when they mentioned, yeah, anybody that watches this gets a brain tumor. I had that exact same feeling as those other stories that tell me like, and now that you've read this, you fucked up basically.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, Videodrome has that added kind of fatalistic thing to it where it's like the kind of deeper he gets, like the more he realizes he was almost kind of screwed the entire time, where it's like he like kind of digs in and then it almost kind of rewinds and almost kind of explains that he was getting fed it. He didn't search for it like he thought he was. He was almost kind of getting played the whole time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think if you think of it as digging in as well, I think at some point it kind of just starts to dig back, basically.
Yep.
Which was really interesting because Max is portrayed as this really kind of like relentless kind of executive that's really, really just obsessed with trying to find this next horrific thing. And it's weird because I feel like he tries to play himself off as like, I'm not a bad guy the whole time. There's a couple conversations he has with
He's just a businessman.
He's just a businessman. Yeah, exactly. And then it starts digging back into him and you get that sense of, even the narrative kind of turns on him, basically.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, what I kind of found this time was or actually for both movies, let's just kind of get into a quick comparison. There's this infinite mirror thing that happens with both of them, where the kind of more they engage with what happens, the more the kind of conspiracy unfolds around them, the world is kind of bigger than they thought, and then kind of the more they're irreversibly trapped in it. And that's kind of the flip side of how you interact with society, whether it be how you interact with ideas of celebrity or the media, which I think is kind of both of those movies. And especially with celebrity, it's like you pay attention and then you've fed it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what both of these movies kind of really get at the heart of, is you have these social phenomenon that are interesting, and you kind of want to know why they're happening. You may not necessarily like the social phenomenon of, kind of celebrity culture getting out of hand, but you try to pay attention and all of a sudden now you're complicit.
Absolutely.
Like, there was a couple lines in Antiviral where they're like, well, what, you've bought into this whole celebrity culture thing? And he's like, well, what do you mean bought in? It's just a fact about this celebrity.
Yep.
What do you mean I've bought in?
I think
both of those guys are kind of, just arguing about celebrities by the end of it.
Those two guys are so funny, by the way. That was like, it's so interesting because I feel like both Cronenbergs are really, really good at keeping tone in their movies. So Antiviral, it does have these two characters that they're kind of just jabronis. They're kind of goofy, but oh my gosh, they are so funny. And in a way that like doesn't actually break the tone of the film, which is very dour. But it's written very expertly. We'll get back to it in just a minute.
Oh yeah, no. So that was, God, watching both of them, my biggest takeaway this time was that, it takes your attention and then it traps you. It's almost like you never had a chance once you've given it your focus, or you. It just has you then at that point.
Absolutely.
And they're both kind of pretty fatalistic as well. I would call them both more or less down endings. Videodrome obviously a little more so than Antiviral.
Really good ending.
Antiviral was a really haunting ending though.
So good.
I just feel like he's even deeper trapped into, like, it's kind of a full circle, but it's almost one click around a spiral down.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, actually. It is. I love Antiviral. And I really like Videodrome as well. I'll say a couple things about it real quick before we move on. I watched it for the first time a couple of days ago, and my immediate thought and feeling is that it's probably a movie I need to watch one or two more times. There's a lot going on, and in the tradition of the Cronenbergs, it doesn't do a ton to hold your hand through it. I was mentioning to Bryant before the episode that the first 4 or 5 scenes of Videodrome kind of just jump around from one thing to another as they're establishing the world, and they allow the audience to come to the conclusion about who these characters are and what the plot is and what's going on in a really organic and a really cool way, actually. It doesn't lose you too much. It just kind of makes you ask the question and kind of answer it for yourself, which I feel like is really effective storytelling. There's a point, I want to say about a third of the way into the movie, where we kind of start the slow descent into madness, and there's some visions that kind of come and go, and we end up not exactly knowing what is going on in reality. And I think Bryant's take on it is that the context and the meta plot is strong enough that it holds the movie together for the better. And
I usually hate narratives that are is this real or is this not? Because that's just, I don't know, it's just this really binary thing.
It can feel kind of like a cop-out as well. If you end on the story on like, who knows what was real or not? You decide. It feels like you're not like owning your work a little bit.
Sure. So with the giant caveat that there's obviously things in Videodrome that are hallucinations, that they say are hallucinations, right, and obviously didn't happen, I do tend to take most of that film at face value. And I think that it's always on... I think I am just clicking with that movie on the subtext of it, where the movie is tripping out, so who's to say that you're not? I think that's the kind of feeling I get, and it's weird. Like, it creeps me out so much because it also the kind of disassociativeness of it, where it doesn't necessarily perfectly track. There is like the second act, you start to feel like you're missing scenes, or it's skipping, or like it has changed its mind on what the reality of the movie is.
You're fragmenting.
Yes, you're starting to fragment.
Along with Max, which is very, very effective. It's a good way of storytelling. But I will say it did kind of lose me a little bit. I'm not giving it quite as much grace as Bryant does in the sense of the kind of losing grip on reality, hallucinations kind of thing. I do feel like that took me out just slightly. I think it's no secret that I tend to enjoy more grounded films, not necessarily that are more easy to follow, but there was just, I think, something about Videodrome that took me out a little bit and made me a little bit less immersed, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because in the end it is a story about the viewer as well. So me being kind of in my own head and body while watching it, as opposed to fully immersing in Max, is probably the point.
I'll totally give it that as like a narrative where you care about the characters and how it ends up. Yeah, by halfway through, none of that matters.
Yeah, you're not really watching as
it's an art piece.
Yeah,
it's an art piece that kind of works as its whole expression. And I think that's kind of what I vibe with. And it's on such a wavelength that just really, it gets under my skin. It's giving me a brain tumor like that. It's on that Videodrome wavelength.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think it didn't creep me out quite as much as I think it did Bryant. I think it's still very good.
Like I said, on the 4th or 5th viewing too.
Sure.
Where I think I watched this and then realized I didn't take any notes the whole time. Where I'm usually like scribbling things down or even pausing so I don't miss stuff. But yeah, no, one of those rare movies that still keeps me on the edge of my seat, like 4 or 5 times in.
It's awesome.
So that I totally, completely forgot about what I was doing and why I was watching that movie.
I think, speaking about some positives about Videodrome, for me, I think it's really obvious that it was the father to a lot of visuals for the body horror genre.
Oh yeah, you mentioning the hand thing again. Like, I just can't get Tetsuo, the Iron Man, out of my head with
Absolutely.
The whole mechanical stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
The wires passing through the skin, all of that.
When the dude blows up with all of the tumors after he shoots him in the head. Oh.
So I was actually going to specifically mention that scene because there's one visual that actually I think they directly adapt in Akira. There is when the guy kind of tumors out and he splits and stuff is coming out of him, there's a very specific split like in the mid front jaw where the teeth kind of come apart that actually directly happens as well when Tetsuo is blobbing out. And for whatever reason, I remember that detail as being very unsettling to me. I first watched Akira when I was like way too young. And there's
I would
like,
have to like frame by frame it.
These
are two properties I know really, really well. And I would think I'd still have to frame by frame.
I absolutely guarantee you I could show you the exact frame where it looks like they took inspiration from Videodrome.
I totally could see that. Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting too. Oh man, I'm going to segue into Akira just for a second. I apologize, folks. It's so interesting too because the Akira is an anime film that is based off of a manga by Katsuhiro Otomo, and
one of my favorite artists. But yes,
he's fantastic. Yeah, he's absolutely amazing. But the manga is really, really long, and the movie only covers parts of it. Well, and it's also this like weird like Frankenstein of a film that has no right to work as well as it does, but somehow comes together and is just fantastic. But I could kind of see that like maybe they took some visual elements from film that maybe would not have been the exact same in the manga as part of that kind of Frankenstein reality.
I think a lot of first reactions to Akira are the ending comes out of nowhere. I have heard that like literally 1,000 times.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, like literally like every person that watches Akira from the first time is kind of like, damn, that ending though. And you're kind of like, yes, and like
that's so funny. Like, I didn't have that reaction at all. I was just like totally into it.
I was in 6th grade and I don't think I had ever seen anything like that.
Yep.
So I mean the whole movie, I don't think I had ever seen anything that had anti-heroes to that extent.
Oh, yeah.
As well. So the whole rebelliousness, the punkness, that they're just like kind of these criminal kids. It's really hard to root for anybody.
Kaneda.
It had an edge that I wasn't necessarily used to. I definitely watched a lot of stuff younger than I should have. But Akira is still a fairly visceral movie. That got to me in that way too, and then the ending was just
absolutely.
I don't know, that movie just hit me in every single way in 6th grade.
We are both huge fans of this film, and I'm going to say we are just barely allowed to talk about it because it is a movie, and while it is animated, it also has body horror elements. So I apologize. I'm a huge anime and manga fan. I try not to bring it up too much on this podcast because I know that's not what we're here to talk about. But forgive us for Akira at least, because it is, I think, at least in genre here.
Yeah, no, like you said, that ending is such a
it's an iconic
body horror bit. Yes,
absolutely. Shout out to Tomo, absolute genius.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, that's Videodrome. It's a fantastic film. If you ignored me when I said pause it and go watch it earlier, make sure you put that on your list, and maybe watch it 2 or 3 times, because I think I'm going to need a second viewing to really solidify my opinion on it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And Cronenberg has such a deep filmography too. It's really easy to miss, if especially with all of the Fly and everything.
Scanners.
Oh man. So yeah, but don't miss it. For me, I mean, Jesus, everyone can have their own opinion what the best Cronenberg is. It's kind of like, it's really hard to compare. For me, Videodrome does stand out.
Cool.
But yeah,
that's awesome.
Anyway. Enough about that. I can just say I love Videodrome over and over and over again. But,
absolutely.
Let's move on to antiviral here.
Absolutely. So we're going from older Cronenberg to younger Cronenberg here. This is Brandon Cronenberg's, I believe, first film. I think he might have done like a short film or something before this. I think this is his first.
This was definitely
theatrical.
where he popped on the scene for me.
Yeah. It came out in 2012, which is very interesting because another film that is kind of body horror adjacent called Excision also came out in 2012 as part of this interesting little bubble of jarring and crazy works, horror films that like kind of came out of nowhere, I feel like.
Yeah, but I feel like they were more acceptable just because I think, like I said, like not like the internet invented them, but I think the internet kind of put the idea out there a little more. So I think they're a little more accepting. I think before it was kind of a codified like concept. Gosh, you say you want to do something where people mutate all out and get all crazy. I think a studio executive is just going to look at you like you're crazy.
What?
But I don't know, if you show him that it's like a thing,
right?
Yeah,
right.
I think it's a little easier to get greenlit.
Absolutely. So antiviral, give a short synopsis here as well. I think we can do this one without as many spoilers, but I'm no promises. If you want to see antiviral and not know what it's about, please, again, pause, go check it out. It's very good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's definitely worth watching going in, quote unquote blind. But the basic premise of the film is that celebrity worship has gotten to such a crazy extreme in the near future that people are now going to clinics and getting incubated with diseases or colds, flus that the celebrities have gotten. So you read about, your favorite celebrity got a flu while they were in Mexico over the break. You can then go to the clinic, get that flu, and feel closer than ever to that celebrity. Obviously, a criticism and an extrapolation of the already kind of crazy celebrity worship of modern times. And Cronenberg, as his father before him, is taking this idea and running it to 11 and saying, well, what if we went really, really crazy with it?
Oh, yeah, no, and not just the designer of viruses, but some of the extensions of some of the technology. They're kind of imagining a lot of our kind of tissue culture research kind of extrapolated in a lot of ways.
Oh my
and
lord!
In a
I don't even want
quasi-legal sense.
Oh, it's so good.
But I mean, you have people that like skin graft, like skin cells from celebrities on themselves. They can be like, oh, this is so and so, and
this feels just like them.
Yeah, ooh, like I have like a part of them in me.
Yeah,
and then there's also the black market guy that's growing stakes of celebrities.
I don't even know if it's black market, man. He's just selling it out of his.
Yeah, I mean, so I say black market because he's also doing the.
Oh yeah, the other. Yeah.
He's the connect for.
Right. So yeah,
it's selling the black market viruses, but yeah, no, he's legally selling just
steaks
of
made
people.
of celebrities. Basically, they take the celebrity cells, they grow them in a lab, and they sell human steaks of them to these celebrity fanatics. And the whole world of antiviral is basically codified in this way. Every aspect of life has become in some way, in worship of these celebrities.
And so it is this like alternate reality, kind of like Videodrome, but it's not alternate enough for it to feel like
you're safe
or like, it unfortunately does not feel like, oh, well, this could never, ever happen.
Yep.
It feels like, oof, like, you're almost like, ouch, I kind of feel called out.
You're pulling your collar a little bit, like, oh no.
Yeah, I don't know. You want to be like, this is so outlandish, but then you're kind of like, well,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
so I think it's a great premise.
It is. It absolutely is a great premise, and it's another one of those films that has predicted a lot of things. There is another technology that ends up kind of being larger toward the end of the film, like right at the ending, but basically, making a digital copy of the celebrity after they've passed and then, having them continue to interact with the world. And you kind of first come into contact with it about halfway through the film, and there's this kind of weird sexual scene where the celebrities
completely about that.
Yeah,
that
the celebrities on the
yeah.
screen and is the person can interact with them in some ways. And honestly, I mean, now we have technologies like deepfake that will put a celebrity's face onto a porn star's body, and then you do whatever you want with it in terms of the technology. So that didn't exist in 2012.
Or even AI scripting. Even be close enough to. I mean, if you want to get it as rudimentary as it was in there.
Yep.
Close. It's close enough.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, you can already make full, basically, scripts from people's voices. There's like some funny ones that go around on like TikTok where like they've made more or less an entire lexicon of like SpongeBob, so you can make SpongeBob say anything, more or less, kind of things like that. It would not be hard to do for any given celebrity.
Oh yeah, no, just given enough footage. I think that's always the thing I see with the deep fakes. The more footage you have, that's why it's easier with celebrities, because you just have hours and hours of high quality video to fake with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of body horror, I think Antiviral has a very interesting approach to it in that it's oftentimes not as explicit or obvious as some other body horror films like Akira or even Videodrome. There's one very iconic scene that kind of gets used as like the poster for the movie, where the main character has a dream and his mouth is morphed into this kind of like metal vent that starts oozing blood.
And he's like held up by cables.
He's held up by cables, exactly. And it's a fantastic scene, but it is a dream. All of the stuff that kind of happens in the quote reality of the film is a little bit more subtle. It's actually through most of the movie, the main character has accidentally infected himself with a really, really deadly virus, and he's just kind of slowly dying. He's incredibly sick every day.
He's getting worse and worse.
And the body horror, I think, in a lot of ways, just comes from how well the actor portrays this sickness and just how awful it feels to go along with him on this.
The whole movie feels like a hospital.
Yes, it's very sterile.
The whole thing is like so blown out and bright. It feels like a fluorescent light, and everything is so white from Caleb Landry Jones' face.
His
to the
skin
walls.
is like paper.
Yeah, and he's like checking his temperature, and he's doing like I'm sick things the whole time. He's hobbling along with a cane. He has a really nasty rash. He's coughing up blood.
Yep.
The whole movie kind of, like I said, feels like a hospital to me.
It's extremely unsettling. And I feel like something that Antiviral did for me that Videodrome didn't necessarily do. It didn't kind of abandon the premise at any point. Like we kind of admitted about Videodrome, partway through it kind of lets you go, all right, we're just doing the art thing now. Antiviral really wraps you in and kind of doesn't let go. For me, at least,
it commits so hard to its premise.
Yes.
And it is not just wallpaper.
Nope.
It's not just like, oh, here's like something, and then it's just going to be this kind of movie. I feel like there's a lot of action movies and stuff that'll have like some awesome premise, and then you're like, that's just the setup in the first 10 minutes, and then we're just like doing an
generic action movie.
No, like this is like about the premise and keeps complicating it, keeps unfolding it, and keeps finding new things to do with it.
It's also extremely engaging. It's one of those films where you're definitely on the edge of your seat the whole time. And for me, it was not predictable, which is nice. Everything that happens is relatively like within the scope of the movie. It's not unpredictable in the sense that like an M. Night Shyamalan film is, but it really does a good job of making things happen organically and interestingly.
And by the end of it, it's not such a convoluted mess that it doesn't make sense. Like you kind of get to the end of it and the knot actually kind of unties and you're kind of like, oh, damn, that actually hella makes sense and goes through the whole thing.
It all came together.
I
feel like that's one of Brandon Cronenberg.
It's not just like twists to be twisty. I hate that shit where you're like, oh, gotta have this and boom, and then this. And then you're like, well, wait, what the fuck is all that? Like, that doesn't make any sense when you like go through it.
Absolutely. Last Jedi. Oh, sorry, that was weird. I had a non-horror cough for a second.
Last Skywalker.
That's right. Oh no. Yeah, we're not gonna open that bag of worms, folks.
But stay tuned next week for our Star Wars podcast.
Oh my gosh. Star Wars summer special of Film Fiends. Hey, we'll do it. If enough people like and comment, we will do a Star Wars episode. Anyway, going right back to it. So one of, I think, Brandon Cronenberg, the younger Cronenberg's strongest suits is that he commits entirely to his premises. He has a very adept way of world building. And he encapsulates you in this future that's so believable and so near to the truth that you don't really have any choice but to get wrapped up in it. His film Possessor is very similar as well. Also a fantastic film that has some body horror elements.
His protagonists are very nebulous as well. Not that they're like, but they're still like great, well-defined characters, but they're kind of hard to pin down.
Sure.
Like at a certain point, like halfway through Antiviral, you're just like, how much money are you like gonna make off of this? This seems like it's almost not worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess to kind of solidify and extrapolate on the premise a little bit more for you guys. Basically, the main character works for one of these clinics in which they sell the celebrity viruses, but he's like kind of stealing the proprietary viruses and taking them home and cracking them. There's an element where I think they kind of make a little bit of a connection between human virus and computer virus, because what they've been doing is they've been taking the virus from the celebrities and like gene hacking them so that they're not contagious, thus they can't be distributed in anywhere but the clinic. But they've made the machine that they've made to do this can also, basically undo it. And the character has taken one of these machines home secretly, and he'll smuggle the virus out of the lab, take it home, make it contagious again, and then sell it on the black market.
They basically treat the process like copywriting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they actually call it copywriting. And it's just kind of the process of making it not contagious. And then you're like, oh, well, then it is unique.
Totally.
Because that was one of the first things. You're like, oh, I'm just going to inject you with this flu, and then you're going to walk out and infect 100 other people.
That's one of the super interesting
it's not
things.
Special anymore. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I really, really enjoyed about antiviral as well, is just that everything just made sense. Like not in a way that it's not a simple premise, and it doesn't over-explain, but it lets the viewer make all of those final steps. It gives you all of the information about what's going on, about the premise and the things that are happening, and it lets you do that final step of like, oh, right, okay, so that's why the virus isn't contagious. It's proprietary. Right. That kind of thing. Just there's simple, small elements to the film that I feel like make it so masterful.
Yeah, I think for me, one of my favorite ones was that you have to get the latest virus, too.
Yeah.
Which just perfectly ties into the whole celebrity culture thing, but you can't have last season's flu.
Yeah, there's a moment where the main character tries to go and get one of the older flus, and they're like, "Wait, we just got this new one in, so we've discontinued that. Why would you want that one?" Kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's
super interesting. Super interesting.
And then you have to be super up on it, and that all the celebrities are in on it. That you get these house calls where if you do get sick, or it's almost like a racket, like. You almost like want to get sick because then you could like sell
you get a lot of money off of it. And there's also like the big main celebrity, I believe Freya Stein or something like that. That actually may be the completely wrong name. I don't remember what she's called.
Oh God. No, I'm blanking. I finished it yesterday. I know. Right? I'm so bad at characters' names.
But the main celebrity, I feel like I got it completely wrong.
I turned
unfortunately.
my phone off so that it doesn't make noise.
There you go. She has like a deal with the main character's viral clinic where she can only sell viruses to them, which is also another really interesting commentary about, the various corporate deals that celebrities are often kind of forced to make just so that they can make money off of their image.
Oh, yeah. No, and it was it's the way that they commodify biological and organic matter, like things that you wouldn't think can be like a property or you can sell them are in this world. And I think that's actually a very unique interpretation of body horror.
Absolutely.
Where you usually talk about like, oh, well, it's kind of people getting combined with machines. But this is literally just like people as something to be bought and sold by the end. Yeah. I think there was one line where he's kind of getting not like kidnapped, but he's kind of getting taken by like two kind of strong men in the car. And they're like, yeah, don't look so worried. You're a commodity. And you're like, we're not going to hurt you because you're worth something.
Yep.
And that was this like, God, it really twisted me up kind of times. Where it's like, no, the horror is that you're a commodity.
Yep.
But that's actually what makes you safe in this situation.
It's dehumanizing in a way that body horror also is. I think one of the core aspects of body horror is that when you do these things to the body, you start feeling less than human, or the body that you're watching on the screen enters this uncanny valley where you're no longer understanding it and as a human. And so I think dehumanization is a big part of that as well. And they just treat it a little bit differently in antiviral in the sense of the kind of commodification of your person.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know if I want to like completely spoil the ending, but by the end, it's only the body that matters.
Yep.
Where it's like anything that made the celebrity them is completely gone. Yep. And it's now just a body to be kind of harvested and exploited.
Oh God, it's so good. Yeah, definitely. Again, folks, we won't, spell out the exact beats of the ending there, but go and watch it. Antiviral hit super, super hard for me. Very good. So
it was so uncomfortable. Man, I remember when that movie came out, going back to me working in the video store, I remember coming out and being like, Brandon Cronenberg, who the hell is that? Like, But then I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I remember just like kind of being like completely struck by it, where I was like, whoa. But I think it was maybe a little too ahead of the curve for people still. Or I think 10 years ago, people, yeah, we had celebrities 10 years ago, obviously, but I don't think
we didn't have the Kardashians. I mean, we did, but like
we had Jersey Shore.
We don't have 2021 Kardashians.
Yeah, I mean, it was Jersey Shore version of that, not Kardashian version of this,
right.
I guess.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, I remember trying to recommend it to people and just like, well, you get halfway through explaining that people like deliberately infect themselves with like viruses. And you kind of just watch the like expression, just like
they're like, come on, man, don't you just have like a zombie movie or something?
Yeah. So I had this like, oh my, I guess this movie is just like like way too disgusting for people, just like on its premise.
Well, and it's funny too, because
so I've always like hella warned people when I'm like, yeah, this movie's like hella good, but it's like really gross though.
Yeah, well, it's funny too, because I want to kind of mention that as well, because not only you, but also one of my colleagues from work also was like, yeah, it was good, but it was really gross. And I'm actually pretty susceptible to gross out stuff. I don't really like it. That's why I haven't watched stuff like Human Centipede, because I don't like any sort of waste matter and whatnot. It kind of does. It's not fun for me. But something that actually grossed me out a little bit more than this, going back again, is Excision. That movie pushed a couple of buttons for me and was like a little tough in like an unfun way. But Antiviral for me actually it didn't gross me out at all. It gave me, still weird using this word because I've kind of just found out about it, but squick a little bit. Throughout the whole film, actually, my skin was crawling and I was squirming.
I was about to say, it makes my hair stand on end.
Yeah, and it's
like ants are crawling on me or something.
Yes, well, and that was the thing. What I really, really appreciated about Antiviral is it was that way throughout the entire film. Like there would be moments where I could like kind of calm down for a second. They're having a normal interaction, that kind of thing. But it had enough scenes at enough of frequency that I was never like comfortable, and I love when films do that. They just wrap you up and never let you go.
The score is really unsettling too.
The score is really unsettling.
It's great. I was halfway through it. My roommate came out of his room and was like, "Oh, Jesus, you're watching a movie? Like that scared the hell out of me. Like I thought like fucking aliens were outside my room or something." Because it was just doing this like a like thing, and he like he did not put together that I was like watching a movie.
Sorry, D-Pro. Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, no, it's creepy enough to get to people that aren't even watching it.
I love it. Well, I think you guys have gotten enough about Antiviral from us. That's Videodrome and Antiviral. We are running a little low on time here, so I think we'll probably call that for the main portion.
Sure, sounds good.
I hope you guys got a lot out of that. I hope you watched the films. I hope if you've seen them already, you enjoyed the discussion. We'll go ahead and do our very last segment here, which is just I know what you watched last summer. And this is going to be kind of a cool one because we actually watched some similar stuff. Bryant, you want to let them know?
Yeah, I caught most of the new stuff that was coming out. I did Army of the Dead, the new Conjuring, and the new Saw.
Yep,
so
and I did
most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I did The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and I did Spiral from the Book of Saw. And then I also
Saw 9. Yeah.
And then I also kind of went back and for whatever reason decided to watch all of American Horror Story season 8, which is the apocalypse season.
Nice.
So we each watched 2 good movies and then 1 bad thing. Sorry, I shouldn't. Yeah. Zack Snyder, we love you.
Don't take the words out of my mouth. No, I actually really I think I liked Conjuring 3 a lot more than other people did.
It was okay.
I think it swapped up the formula in a way that I dug. It kind of took it in a whole like straight up paranormal investigator way. The movie really focuses on the Warrens and doesn't have that many other characters in it, which I felt was a strength because I think that that's the most interesting part of that whole franchise.
Sure.
They have 2 interesting characters and 2 great actors playing them. So you do that. Just ride that all the way to the bank.
And it's smart, I think. It is a smart direction. After talking with Bryant about it and like thinking about that perspective, I actually like it a little bit more. I saw it in theater, which is really nice, on a big XD screen. And it was a fun film, but it did leave a little bit to be desired for me. It wasn't super scary. It was also very dark. Throughout the entire film, it was kind of just difficult to see what was going on. And one of the accolades that I gave Hereditary is that even its dark scenes are very, very crisp and clear. And I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but it looks like very realistically night, but also you're not having trouble figuring out what's going on. The Conjuring was always in at least one filter and also really dark. And it
was really contrasted too.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of scenes where just like half of people's faces are just in complete darkness.
Yep.
It was actually the very first scene. I was kind of like, man, I don't know who these characters are. Can I like see them first? Like,
yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think there's a cool stylistic thing there, but I just don't think I was getting enough visual information. Like it was just...
The style was getting in the way of the actual storytelling information.
Yeah. But overall, it was okay. I think the paranormal investigator aspect is cool. I just, I like the more kind of traditional haunted housey style stuff. That's why I like Conjuring 1 and 2 a lot. Annabelle, the second one, I don't remember, Creation, also really, really loved. And I think it's a cool direction for The Conjuring to go. I think it does work well for them. It just didn't quite interest me as much.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, it's not like it scared me. I was enjoying it like it was a John Constantine story.
Pulp
so just
horror.
like a pulp adventure. Like, yeah, they're fighting a witch. Like,
totally.
Like, I don't know. It was
Satanism.
Fun for me.
Exactly. There was a lot of like, those dang Satanists.
I mean, like everybody has like magic powers. Like,
they literally become magic in this one.
And like, Ed Warren is like power blasting like some like demon down the stairs.
I forgot about that. Yeah, he totally is like he's
the
like
power of the all.
Yeah, he goes all fucking full Jesus mode. It's pretty great actually.
Yeah, I was like, okay, damn, like I'm kind of down with that. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's pretty funny.
I mean, I can see how it's maybe a betrayal to more hardcore fans of the series.
Sure.
I am not a hardcore fan.
Yeah, I'm not quite betrayed as what I would call a fan of The Conjuring. It was just
may be a harsh term, but
it was a little pulpy for me.
Yeah.
Saw 9.
Saw 9 disappointed me.
Bryant and I watched
lie.
together.
Yeah.
It was laughable in the sense that I was literally laughing out loud
We were definitely having a good time, but we were kind of laughing at it.
I think really it could have been okay if it just did more of the Saw thing. It seems like it only put the traps in there just so it could call itself Saw, and it wasn't actually interested in doing that at all.
No, they really hit the procedural bit, which, there's always been a procedural half to Saw.
Right.
But now it's like the whole thing,
right?
With this movie, I just needed a Saw movie, and if you were gonna do something different, like this just wasn't different enough,
or it was different, but
or novel or original, like
different in the wrong direction too. I feel like where it's like you're soft rebooting. I kind of get it, and there's some elements there that I felt like could have been okay, but it honestly kind of just felt like a parody.
It fell really flat.
Unfortunately.
I mean, you wanted to do like the cop thing. Like, I mean, why'd you want to do a cop thing if you had like no ideas?
I don't know. And why would you cast Chris Rock as the protagonist and Samuel L. Jackson as his dad? And then if you're going to do that, at least don't flash back to Samuel L. Jackson with a bad mustache. Mm-hmm. Oh my, that was so funny.
That was
There's hilarious. A very, very funny scene in it. You'll know if you see it. It was laughable. Kind of unfortunate.
Unfortunately, it's for hardcore completionists only.
Yep.
I am a huge Saw fan, and it very, very flat.
Yep.
I do not require much from my Saw movies, and still.
Is it really the 9th installment too?
It is.
Jeez,
I think they
that's
numbered
crazy.
up to 7, and then it was Jigsaw, and Spiral. Yeah.
Spiral, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then go ahead and tell us a little bit about Army of Darkness before we get out of here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the
Army of the Dead. Oh man.
The new Zack Snyder one. Again, just a little disappointed. I'm not exactly sure what I expected because I don't necessarily like very much of his movies. But boy, was it really, really dumb. Like the whole way through. Just kind of like one of those movies where like they had all of the set pieces and all of the cool shit they wanted to do. And then like needed to just like bullshit their way from one of those to the other.
It was just a theme park.
Yeah, it's a theme park. So I don't know. It's kind of making me feel like a hater because I remember I watched it like right when it came out and then saw like everybody on social media kind of digging it. And I was kind of sitting there like, damn, I kind of thought that sucked.
A lot of what I've heard is like, it's kind of stupid fun. I've talked to some people at work about it that enjoyed it, but don't expect anything too heady kind of thing.
No. I think the most disappointing part was they like first get into there and like all of the zombies are like, it's like too hot in Vegas because it's like 115 degrees and they're like all dead and like crusting and like in piles. And they like tease and they're like, oh, well, watch out for when it rains because then they'll like all come back. So I was kind of like, okay, that's cool. I can't wait for it to rain and have all these zombies come back. And it never rained.
Wait, what?
No.
What? That's really bizarre. Why was that even
So every now and then there'd be things where you're like, that's halfway interesting. I can't wait to see that paid off or anything. And then it was like
nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
So
boy. It was unfortunately one of those movies. But if you really, really need to see Dave Bautista shooting zombies in the head, this is your only game in town.
Oh, I'm still I almost missed that. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna watch it. It's gonna be a beer movie for me. There's movies that I want to watch while I'm drinking a couple and don't want to really pay serious attention to. So it's gonna go on one of these nights. Again, running out of time here, but
it's one of those like, oh yeah, we need to steal this money. And then we're halfway through. Oh, so the mission was actually this. And you're like, no. What the fuck was the whole thing for?
And there's zombies, but they're smarter.
Yeah.
And faster. Anyway, wrapping up here. I did watch American Horror Story Season 8, Apocalypse. This is the first season in which they bring stuff from the other seasons together, and it's a big crossover thing.
Cool. Okay.
It was really bad, unfortunately. I feel like maybe I should go back and rewatch the first season because I don't know if maybe my preferences have just changed or what my standards for film are have just changed. When I first watched American Horror Story, I mean, it was probably like 6-7 years ago at this point when I watched the first season. And it's very cheesy. The dialogue is really bad. The plot doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the characters are, I guess the characters are probably the high point. There are some interesting characters there, especially the legacy ones that you get. And there's like an interesting enough kind of world going on. But it reminds me of why I dropped the series in the first place, because it's very goofy and Hollywoody, and the dialogue is really bad. Oh man, there's some lines in there that I'm just like sitting there watching and just embarrassed. So again, don't want to burn any bridges here, guys. Anybody who worked on AHS, I'm sure you guys did great. Like I said, characters are pretty cool. Actually, my cousin, shout out Pete down in LA, actually worked on season 5 of American Horror Story Hotel, which was one of my favorites, actually. My favorites are Hotel and Murder House.
Very cool.
And that's awesome. Like, I really think that's super cool. And there's a lot of cool things about the franchise. It just, unfortunately, for whatever reason, season 8 just felt really ridiculous to me. It didn't really land on any of the points. So,
dude, and yeah, that's a big caveat. We gotta say, like, hundreds of people work on these movies,
yes,
and put like crazy work in. Like, I can make fun of Army of the Dead all I want, but the people that did the zombie prosthetics for that, the people that edited it, the people that did the color correction, like.
Absolutely.
Dude, like, there's hundreds of talented artists working on this.
That's true. We do want all of you guys to know, dear listeners, that we really, really appreciate the craft here. And we know that there's a lot of people that are thankless in these projects. And if we say we don't like something, we're not trying to disparage anybody, even the director or the main actors. We understand that, sometimes you don't make something great, or sometimes you make something that a lot of people enjoy, like Army of the Dead, and just didn't happen to land for us. So that's fine.
Yeah, Doc, like, movies are movies. And yes, it's all for fun, even if you don't necessarily love everything. Yes.
All right. Well, we ran a little bit long this time, everybody.
One thing I do want to say, I also rewatched Raw recently because I got the new Blu-ray of it that Arrow put out.
So good.
It was a very, very good movie. If you absolutely need Raw in the absolute best definition possible, that Arrow Blu-ray is special. It's not like a revelation because it's like a modern digital movie. It's, pretty much the same thing. But
sponsor us, Arrow.
It's really good.
Sponsor us.
Exactly. we're on. Yes, we get no sponsorships, by the way.
No, we're not.
Any actual thing I mentioned, I've bought and
that is actually
bring it up on the show. Yes.
I mean, we're obviously a new podcast, so you probably understand that. But yeah, anything we do recommend is just straight from the hearts. And if we ever do get a sponsorship, fingers crossed, we'll let you know. Anyway, guys, we ran a little bit long this time. I hope you stuck with us till the end. We had a lot of fun talking about body horror and Cronenbergs, the younger and the older. As always, if you guys have any comments, any questions, please find us on our social medias. You can find us at Real Film Fiends, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you for joining us again for episode 5, and we'll see you next time.
Signing off. Thanks for listening.